Hello, everyone. I'm Charles Laughlin. I am Senior Analyst with Locology, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be joined by two great speakers today, Jeremy LaDuque and Nils Moor from TruPresence by Bridgeline. And we're going to be talking about preparing your multi-location business for Google Analytics 4. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy in a second, but a couple of housekeeping notes before we do that. This webinar is being recorded and will be circulated to all attendees with the presentation within 24 hours of the broadcast. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end, which I will be moderating. So there is a question window on your panel. If you have questions during the course of the webinar, please enter those questions. We will keep track of them. We will ask them at the end, as many of them as we can get to. So please think of questions, add them to the questions panel during the course of the webinar, and we'll be happy to answer them during the Q&A session. As I noted, today's speakers are Jeremy and Nils, and without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy.
Charles, thanks so much. I know you've been traveling a lot too, so thanks for jumping on with us, and thanks for letting us be here. I've always loved Locology. I love what you guys do. It's such a great service to both your partners, but just businesses as well. So, and I'm looking forward to April. I don't know who picked Coronado Bay, but not a bad place to hold your next conference. So that's pretty exciting.
We agree.
So Nils, thanks for being here with me. I'm excited to talk about GA4. So we're going to refer to it as GA4 in this webinar. And you're going to hear a couple different names. So I'm Jeremy LaDuque with TruPresence, and our parent company is Bridgeline, and Nils is with a company called WooRank, who's another company owned by Bridgeline. But we're both in the SEO world, in the multi-location world, and now thanks to Google and in the GA4 world. so welcome. And
not that we had a choice, but
we did not have a choice on that one. Although at least Google told us it was happening well in advance. So so let's jump in. Really exciting stuff. Really advanced stuff when you get down to it, but we're going to keep this at a business level and talk about, what are the benefits of GA4? What is it? How does it relate to you as a multi-location business? How does it relate to SEO and things like that? So, but before we jump in, I want to run a quick survey to see, because we're in a unique place where we can actually be running UA, Google Analytics Universal, we'll refer to that as UA, or GA4, or both. So Dara, could you cue the survey, and let's actually get a sense of what everybody is running here today. It'll be interesting to see that. Let me give, awesome. So the question up is, what version of Google Analytics are you running today? Are you running what has been for years now, which is Analytics Universal, or are you running the new GA4? Or you could be running both right now. And I know there's a lot of companies out there running both right now, so they can understand and compare and contrast. So give everybody a second here. And while we're waiting, just real quick, I am calling in from California, and Nils is pretty far away over in Belgium. so it's a little early for me, and it's late for Nils. And Charles, you're in the middle. You could actually be right in the middle of us in Chicago.
I am literally in the middle of broadcast standard Voice America, Chicago, Illinois. Yeah.
All right, so let's see here. Okay, awesome. Oh, I can't see that. Can you guys see that? This is great. So we have Nils, can you see that? What do we got here? Do we have?
Yeah, so we have 71% for UA, so the old Google Analytics, 0% Google Analytics for only, and then using both is the rest, like shy of 30%.
Oh, 70-30. So 70-30. So we've got some folks, we've got 30% using GA4, right? But they're using it and they're still running UA at the same time. So that's great. All right, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. So we do have a lot of folks who have not jumped into GA4 yet. So that's interesting.
So gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that sort of dual use, is that in your sense the standard kind of entryway into GA4 is to use both for a while? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yes, if you're already familiar or if you're already using Universal Analytics, I think it's the best way to do it, to have both installed on your website and roll over from one to the other. Of course, if you install new new profiles on new websites, or you just start using Google Analytics, you have no choice. It's GA4 only. I mean, there's still some, like if you click a number of buttons and drop downs and accordions, then they still allow you. And although that changes, so maybe I'm not correct anymore, but it's pretty hard these days to even get an old Universal Analytics profile still running. So you're kind of forced into GA4. But I guess, yeah, for probably a lot of people in this webinar, they're coming from a UA world. The best way is running both until Google shuts off the light on
doesn't let you anymore. Okay, sorry, carry on.
No, great question. I mean, the simple answer, is right now you have the opportunity to run both, and you should, right? That's the simple answer. Right? You should be running both right now because all of your historical data. In fact, let's just jump into some of these bullets. So we're going to cover this stuff. I'm going to cover the top three because those are easy, and I'm giving Nils the really hard stuff. So he'll cover some of the other stuff. So, but this is a perfect segue into this. You have to understand this is an entire new platform, right? You are not migrating over, and your current UA data is not moving over. So to the point we were just saying, should you be running both? You should, because at a certain point, you will not have your current data. You will not have your universal data anymore. You will move over. And I wanted to bring up the evolution of Google Analytics because it's fascinating and it makes a lot of sense. I think the bottom line, the more I get to understand GA4, is it really does make a lot of sense in a lot of ways. But universal dates back to 2005, right? So if you think about it, I mean, we're in a paradigm and we're in a platform that dates back to 2005. So it was certainly time for Google to come out with something new. And I think you're going to hear in this session here in the next 50 minutes what are some of the huge rocks are that Google had to think about in moving to a new analytics package. But very quickly, what's interesting is, we went again all the way back to 2005 with Urchin. And fun fact, I mean, UTM, actually stands for Urchin Tracking Module. And they did upgrade to their classic analytics, but then they moved into this strange area where they had universal, but they also had to start tracking apps, and they came out with Firebase. And now they've got GA4, right? Which not only tackles that, not only does it actually track both web and app, which is great, it's tackling a lot of other things, right? They had to contemplate privacy, they had to contemplate a cookieless browser world, and they had to start to contemplate, AI and the fact that, they've got some pretty powerful machine learning happening, and how could they introduce AI into their analytics. And basically they had to change, the fundamental data model of how they were tracking website activity. And that's really what this does, is move to that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, just kind of a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the data model itself, we have moved, from sessions to events. And I'm sure everybody's heard that, right? What does this mean? I've gone from sessions to events. So we're going to touch on that. But Nils, do you want to talk at all on just privacy and predictive AI for us to give us a little bit more there?
Yeah, sure. So indeed, and maybe I just want to start out with one, yeah, call it a disclaimer. So Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4, there's not going to be an easy migration path, so you will. Like there's a few best practices and a few guidelines to follow, but we are essentially going to a different world. Like GA4, the way they perceive how analytics should be done, and by they I mean Google. It's a new way of thinking, a new mindset you need to apply. So that's just a big yeah, disclaimer to start everything off with. Now, indeed, when it comes to things like yeah, privacy has always been sort of an issue with Google Analytics, especially in the Universal Analytics world, where they pull in IP information, which they then turn into geographic data. Whether your users are male, female, ages, interests even. So there's always that lingering like question of where do they get that data from? Add in GDPR, CCPA rules that came along in the more recent years, and some very little configuration you can do on the Google Analytics side to basically be compliant with those rules, especially for GDPR, which is the one I'm most exposed to here in Europe. Google Analytics has always been a bit like, yeah, your problem, not ours. You'll have to figure it out. So in GA4, so the new Google Analytics, they kind of started from a clean sheet, I would say. The idea of data tracking and doing analytics on top of that has kind of changed, that everything is more customizable now. So that's both good and bad, because that means, well, on the good side, it's customizable exactly to your needs, the needs of your company, how your company works, whether you're a small or a big company, have different teams, different geolocation, stuff like that. But at the other end, it forces you to customize your stuff. So there's no more just drop a script of JavaScript on your website and everything will more or less work, and you can set some goals and things like that. But like 80% of the work is done. Now we go to a world where maybe 20% is done. I'm just making up numbers here, but just to make a point, like, and to make sure that you get your business questions answered, you'll need to customize way more. So privacy is one of those things. So it's now up to you to well, up to you as a business owner, I mean, or a website owner, to define, okay, what data do I want to come or do I want to send from my web application or my mobile application? Because yeah, GA4 is now natively kind of bringing both together. What data do I send over, and then how do I process that data yeah, within Google Analytics 4 and get data out of it? So they're giving you more tools to comply to privacy rules. So that's a good thing. But again, you'll need to customize them even more.
No, I think those are really good points. So keep in mind, if you were to open up Universal today, if you were just starting out with it, which nobody is, but if you were, there are dozens of canned reports in there. It's almost more of a, you know, really a reporting tool, right? You install it, you go in and you look and you see. Whereas GA4 is really more akin to your own reporting tool. I mean, that you build. I mean, you've got to get in there. And that does go back to the data model. Like it's so much more flexible that they couldn't just create a bunch of canned reports for you. You have to go in there. So that's one big thing, and one big takeaway here is is understand that, load up GA4 now. It's not hard. All you got to do is just grab the tags and put them in there. We'll talk, Nils, we should talk at some point about the fact that Google and everybody is recommending you use Tag Manager now for your GA4 tags. But you do have to get in there, and you really got to stop and think about what data you want to report on. So, and then just real quick, and we'll move on, is just what Nils was talking about on privacy and GDPR and everything. I like a term, GA4 moves you into a privacy safe customer insights world. And that's really what's happening here, and that's a good thing, right? Obviously, we have to do that. Nils, I do want one more thing on this. We were just talking the other day, and you were saying, because privacy really comes down to PII, right? Personal identifiable information. And you mentioned, like, do you want to know, if you're selling shirts, do you really need to know that John is a large and Susie is a medium and stuff, or do you just need to know, like, I just need to, I need to know I sell this many extra larges on average and this many larges, and that's kind of a nice way of thinking of, do you really need PII? Because that's a world we're moving into with GA4 is
Yep.
It's privacy safe.
Yep. And so we move from installing a script, it dumps everything on Google servers, and then within the UI you can do some filtering. We're moving from that world into a new world where you can set up, as they call it now, and that's a word you'll probably hear over and over again when talking about GA4 or working with GA4, is data streams. So it's now up to you to set up a data stream or multiple data streams. So you can have data stream from your web application, from your mobile application, but now you're in the lead essentially. Like, you decide what do you want to send into Google Analytics, so in Google servers. It's not a catch-all thing anymore. Like, we'll just dump everything and then filter as you need it. No, no, I decide what I'll send and what I need, so I can build my reports, and everything else is just not going over the wire. Every other piece of information is not going over the wire. So you're more in control now on those things.
Yeah. All right, you're going to see me force us to move to the next slide, because we could probably spend an hour on each slide, but we won't. We'll keep moving along here. So we're going to switch gears a bit here, and we're going to talk about GA4 as it relates, to SEO and Core Web Vitals. I know everybody's been asking us, like, well, what does this mean? Does SEO change? And what else do I need to be concerned about? And so we definitely wanted to address that GA4 is an analytics tool, right? It's tracking what is occurring. It is not something that's redefining ranking factors, or Google's ranking algorithms. But what is interesting about GA4 is it makes you, it's going to allow you, we've mentioned this several times, to really create your own reporting, and much better reporting, because you're able to track somebody's entire journey versus just a session. And that's interesting, and that brings out, okay, how do I do that? What does that mean? And there's something else, which is Core Web Vitals, which is, really, I mean, if you had to say what are the major things going on with Google, it's been Core Web Vitals and now GA4. So let's start with Core Web Vitals. And Nils, you've done a tremendous amount of work on Core Web Vitals. Our own WooRank tool, which is an SEO auditing tool, you had to actually build an entire new, area just for Core Web Vitals. So just so everybody, we baseline, just give me like a 30-second on what is Core Web Vitals, and then we'll kind of talk about, why is that important? Why are we talking about it here as it relates to analytics?
Yep. So Core Web Vitals, the word vital. So there's a bunch of metrics that are being tracked when you're using Chrome as your web browser. and you're visiting web pages, some performance related, because that's important to know, performance related and mostly anonymized pieces of data are sent over, at least if you're opted into it, are being sent over to Google. So they look at performance, how quick, how well you perceive a web page as an end user. Is it loading quickly? Are big images or big elements, can be a video, can be an image, can be anything else, loading very quick in your browser? Are elements on a page not jumping too much, like banner ads or banners in general, some dynamic stuff that suddenly pushes all the text over? Like that's not good for your user experience, because that's what it's all about. Like it's vitals, it's metrics that will show in a scientific way almost how well you're perceiving as an end user, how well a web page is loading, and the experience of that page. Because in the end, Google always wants best for the user, of course. Like they want a user to have a good experience on the internet, on a website. When going from Google into a website, they want a user to have their needs fulfilled. Like if you have a question or you want to buy something, like the page you end up on should be should give you a good experience as a user. So that's what it's all about. So it's a scientific way by tracking certain metrics to decide, okay, is this page providing a good user experience to users visiting your website? And that's what Google been very vocal on in the last 2 to 3 years. They've built a lot of tooling, not in Google Analytics. Those live more in Google Search Console, which is another sort of analytical tool in Google's realm. But it's looking more at your mostly like organic type of traffic, like traffic to your website coming from search engines, whereas Google Analytics is for everything basically. But a bunch of out-of-the-box metrics you'll find in GA4, so in Google Analytics, out of the box without the need to set them up yourselves, are about timings, like how fast does a page load, how fast does a certain action take, things like that. So even though Core Web Vitals lives more in a Google Search Console realm, Google Analytics out of the box provides a bunch of metrics and reports on top of those metrics to visualize how well your users are experiencing your websites. And that translates into timings of certain things, actions, page loads, things like that. So they're firing on all levels. Like they have pushed Core Web Vitals out through other tools. But now on Google Analytics, you'll see similar things. It's not called Core Web Vitals, but it's all the same thing. Like they're using the same sort of data.
No, it's interesting, right? I mean, Google, like you mentioned, it's almost scientific. I mean, Google had to come up with a way to track the experience, right? How do you do that, right? So they had to pick 3 things and say, this is how we're going to do that. I'm going to go back one slide, because what's interesting is in the progression or the evolution of how Google got to GA4. I mean, you really could put Core Web Vitals right in here, right in here, because that was a learning experience for them to get to Core Web Vitals and then realize how important the experience is.
Yep.
UA is really about your users and your new users and your total users. But GA4 introduces active users, as something new, which again all really speaks to, Google has gotten to the point where they're literally tracking the user's behavior on your website, right? I mean, like real behavior, like literally, does the page shift, and does that frustrate me as a user of the website? I mean, that's amazing, really. But that's what we're talking about here is, Google has evolved to the point where they're actively tracking users and making sure they're having the best possible experience they can have. And that's why we're talking about it here, is that you really need to understand, we should have run a survey at the beginning. Are you also looking at Core Web Vitals metrics? Because if you're not, you need to learn about Core Web Vitals and GA4, and you need to think about them together because they're all about the user experience, and the user experience, is SEO now. I mean, SEO, of course, content is still king, and you've got to worry about those SERP reports, but you also have to worry about, the user's actual experience on your site. So, all right, no, that was great. All right, good. All right, let's keep going, and let's talk about the migration path. I'm sure everybody's curious, like, what is going on here? Charles, we have probably opened up more questions than provided answers so far, I suspect. So we'll probably have to do this again in a month because
That's up to you.
It really does, right? It opens up questions. Like you're talking about, guys, I've heard you say you're moving to a whole different world. My UA analytics aren't even going to be available to me. I'm going to have to go into GA4 and set up my own reports, so we are opening up a lot of questions, and it certainly suggests you need
I have one question actually,
Yeah.
and I hope it can be a quick answer. What is the delta in user involvement between the old versus the new in terms of how much work will be going into running analytics with the old platform versus the new platform?
The answer is, as almost everything in digital marketing and SEO, it depends. I do think that universal analytics, again, the old analytics, was very opinionated on how it viewed the way websites should be analyzed, which made it fairly simple to use because you just install a script, it pulls in all the data, and it provides a bunch of out-of-the-box stuff. But it was very, again, opinionated, and not taking too much context of your business and your website into account. GA4 takes a whole different approach where they kind of provide you all of the tools to tweak Google Analytics, the reporting and everything to your needs, to your business's needs. But that doesn't mean, flexibility also means lots of responsibility. So that means indeed that you'll have to look into, okay, what are my actual goals, and what are the things that I need to track? And I expect that, and especially in probably bigger companies, bigger organizations, with cross-team discussions, people will need to think more about, okay, what is it that we want to track? How do we want to set up reports? So there is there is a high responsibility on people using Google Analytics to set it up properly, to customize it properly, to pinpoint the right things to measure, to track, the right data to send into the tool, and then the reports to be built. So that's probably the uneasy answer, that it will require more work from marketing teams, data teams, developers, probably everybody involved in the process of having good analytics.
Yeah. No, and Nils, I know you want to talk about this slide more, but it's a perfect opportunity. I want to bring something up that is interesting. Is that Charles? The bottom line is it is going to be more work, and you should expect more work going into GA4. It literally just doesn't have the canned reports sitting in there like Universal had, which begs the question. And I don't want to be a dissenter here because Google will lock in on me and could ruin my life here by saying this. But is good GA4 right for your business? We actually at WooRank, we had a webinar like a month back, with some experts, and one of the gentlemen was saying, I had a small business, and I actually recommended Matomo, which is an open source analytics tool for websites, because GA4 was just too complicated for this small business. It was just too much. So GA4, believe it or not, is actually not your only option when it comes to website analytics. You've got Adobe Analytics out there, again, Matomo, and you really need to stop and think, like, do I need to move into the world of GA4 because it's not the only option out there. GA4,
not to belabor the point, but this comes up a lot with when you're talking about small businesses using software. Is what's the right line between killing them with capability and giving them just enough to use?
Yeah, no, and I think GA4 begs that question. It's complicated. I mean, to the point where even Google says, and Google has come out and, GA4 now allows you to integrate directly with BigQuery and Google Data Studio. So that starts to suggest that's a complicated tech stack right there for your website analytics. Google is suggesting, here's GA4. Oh, by the way, you might actually want to send the data to a data repository, ours. Oh, and by the way, you might also want to use our Data Studio to visualize the data even more than you can visualize in GA4. And as a small business, and I am a small business owner, I own Sport Clips. I mean, like if now Sport Clips Corporate does all this for us, but like if I were a small business owner and I just owned a hair salon, I wouldn't want to be hearing any of that. I'd just say, no, just give me some analytics. I just want to see the traffic on my website. So it certainly brings the question. We are now moving into a much more complicated world, and is that really something I need? So Nils, talk to us a little bit about the migration path. We actually saw in the survey we have a lot of folks on today who are still in Universal, and they have not actually dipped their toe into GA4. So what are some tips for them?
Yeah. So again, no silver bullets here. No easy. Just click a button and everything migrates over. It's, again, I keep repeating it, but just want to be realistic about it. It's two different worlds. So yeah, things will eventually have to change. But when it comes to migration, maybe some best practices or ways of going about it. And there's, I have to say, some good help center content on the Google Analytics support website. There are some migration guides, even though they're more high level. But anyway, so yeah, when going from one world to the other, again, I think the best thing to do right now, today, is if you don't have GA4 already, start ramping up your teams that are responsible for analytics to have them at least set up the basics of GA4. Now, of course, when we're talking in this environment, probably bigger environments, local businesses, corporate, and things like that, an important first question is already, how are we going to set things up? Like where Universal Analytics used to be one website, one property. If I have a mobile application, it's another property. There was a way to do cross-domain kind of tracking, but it's already kind of an advanced feature of old Google Analytics. So now things are different. Now you can bring basically all data of all your websites and mobile applications all together in one property if you want to do that. But again, customization will be key here, like deciding on the best setup for your company and how things work in your company. Will it be one overarching property with different data streams for different websites, mobile applications, or will it be different? It's kind of up to you to make that decision. Google, again, in those help center articles, does have a few of those example, like fake companies, like I even think there's some geo-localized companies that sell internationally, and how to set up an e-commerce business like that, or a gaming company with like 50 different gaming apps. How should they do it? So there's a couple of examples to kind of draw some inspiration from. But I think that's the yeah, the first important thing to do. Like if we are going to do Google Analytics for what's the best structure in terms of properties and data streams for our company. Then, well, obviously, once that's decided, is setting everything up. So installing the properties on your website, and like you said, yeah, the best way to do it is Google Tag Manager, or at least that's what Google says is the best way to do. It's still possible to not have to use Google Tag Manager and just set up the vanilla properties on your website. That's very doable too. I think the reason they kind of nudge towards Google Tag Manager is because through Google Tag Manager, it's also a little easier to set up things like events, because events is now, like, I mean, already existed in old Google Analytics, but now everything is an event basically. Even a page view doesn't really exist anymore, whereas that was the main metric in old Google Analytics. Now a page view is just an event, like clicking from one page to another is an event. So setting up events is a little easier to do on Google Tag Manager because it doesn't necessarily require any code to be written or to be included in the HTML of your website. So it's something, yeah, a developer doesn't necessarily have to do. It's, yeah, something everybody who can kind of work with Google Tag Manager can do. So that's another choice to be made. Lots of choices you will have to make. But do we go the vanilla route or Google Tag Manager? So setting everything up, the properties, the data streams, and then, yeah, starting collecting that data. So defining your events, what is important to my business. Obviously, if it's an e-commerce business, adding things to a cart, checking out the cart, that's, yeah, the most obvious things, of course, for an e-commerce business, most obvious events. But yeah, like one of the examples, gaming companies, in game, there's probably a ton of important events, depending on the type of game that you want to track with, if you're using Google Analytics. So again, that's very, yeah, very close to what business you're dealing with and what you want to track as a business. Then conversions is something that existed in Universal Analytics, still exists in GA4. So that's a thing you'll need to, yeah, migrate or translate from one to the other and set up from scratch. There is a tool, I think, to sort of help with that migration provided by Google, but it's something you will have to do. So it's not, it doesn't port over out of the box or anything. So that's very important. Same thing with adding your team. Like, I've never been a big fan of how Google deals with, yeah, user roles and groups and who can see what and who can do what. It's improved a little bit. I still wouldn't say it's super, yeah, clear cut. There's still a lot of yeah, different ways to set things up. But that's another thing. Yeah, bring your users into that new property and making sure they can access whatever they need. So that's sort of, yeah, a quick outline of what needs to be done. Deciding how to structure everything, setting it up either through Google Tag Manager or installing it vanilla on your website, or even using like a Shopify or a WordPress or whatever CMS or e-commerce platform you use, like a plugin. That's another way, obviously. So that was number 2. Number 3 is sending in the actual data. There's sort of a default that sends the simplest things like page views and some timing data, so that will happen out of the box anyway. So you'll once you set it up, there will be some data at least. You won't end up with an empty box. But start thinking about what events are important for my business, and start tracking those. 4, conversions, like what events drive a conversion. Like when does a user buy something or do something in game that I really want them to do, conversions. And then, yeah, Yeah, the fifth one is making sure that your teams are onboarded, can access everything, and start working with GA4, because there's you can train people, but in the end, the only the only way to learn a tool like GA is just by using it and playing around. So that's the way to do it. And then, of course, but that's a whole other can of worms. If you run Google Ads, there's a bunch of data to kick from analytics into ads to improve your ads. But I think we can do 3 different webinars on that thing alone. So I won't go into that today. But if your business is heavily relying on Google Ads and the data Google Analytics is synced with, then that's obviously an entire group of other steps you'll need to go through.
Awesome. No, it's a great framework to think about how to move in. And if anybody has any comments, and they want to drop a comment in on any of, any struggles or any insights they've had while they've started to move over, I'd love to hear about it. So I think over the next, what are we talking about? It's what's the date that you absolutely have to be in GA4?
June June of this year. I don't know the exact. Is there an exact day? I can't recall, because it's been pushed a few times. But I think summer or early summer of this year, they're gonna turn off the lights on Universal Analytics.
Yeah. So we're gonna hear a lot of stories over the next few months about people moving over and having to follow the model you just described, which is great, which is you actually have to go in and pick what you want to track, and then you have to set up, the reports to actually track it, and then you got to bring your team in. So.
Yep. By the way, it's July 1st of this year for the let's say normal Google Analytics. For 360, whatever its name. So for the more enterprise, like the paid version of Google Analytics for enterprises is July 1st, but 2024. So they have a year extra. But I assume most people are on the free version, the normal Google Analytics version. So that's July 1st of this year.
All right, awesome. Okay, let's we're almost there, and then Charles will be ready for any questions. But I think the last item on our list is just is a little bit more about planning, and this is more from the standpoint if you're a multi-location business today, we get it. You have layers within your business, right? You have corporate or HQ, and you might have some middle layer in there, right, of territories. And then you have locations, and so you have people all through that structure, right? You've got folks at corporate who, their job might be this project moving from UA to GA4, right? And then you have a whole team that is going to be thinking about, how do I start communicating this to the company, right? How do I start talking about my territory coaches, and then you have an entire audience of locations, either a franchisee or a branch manager or something like that. And everybody throughout that structure relies on some kind of data today, right? Even if it's, here's where my website sits today. This is, this is the kind of traffic I'm getting, and this is the kind of conversion I'm getting from my website. You have an entire organization that is reliant on universal, Google Analytics Universal today, and you're going to have to switch everybody over to GA4. So obviously, one of the things, you're probably thinking about right now is, I need to go into Universal right now and look at what reports I rely on, and I need to make sure I actually recreate those in GA4 immediately. And then once you do that, you need to think about, okay, how do I start to disseminate that reporting out to my audience? So I just wanted to take a moment and say that, in terms of planning, and I've been in and out of a lot of these types of multi-location businesses, obviously, a clear communications plan is going to be key. We're early in the year, so I mean, if you have, if you have some kind of annual event coming up, or if you've got training sessions going on, I mean, I would start introducing the fact now that there is going to be a shift. You can expect reports to look perhaps different. You might even be introducing new reports. But the real nice thing is, if you were to come out with a pros and cons and just start educating everybody on, hey, this is happening. This isn't us, right? This is Google. And it's going to be a lot of work for us, and we're working on it. But we're looking forward to it because GA4 does bring us into modern century analytics, and there's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to learn, and we should be able to get better about our analytics. And the bottom line is, one of the big reasons this is happening is the reason you want deeper insights is so that you have better data to make better decisions on, right? So any multi-location business who, if you're rolling dollars up into a national ad fund, that's a positive message, and you want to start getting that out there, that we absolutely plan on using GA4 for the purposes of better understanding what's happening today on our websites, in order to use and spend your advertising dollars better. So that kind of planning and that kind of communications plan, I know everybody here is familiar with that, and you do that all day long across everything in your business, but this is definitely something that warrants that, becoming a part of your communications plan, becoming a part of getting the message out there that this is happening. Expect things to be different. As you know, if you've got 1,000 or 10,000 folks out there who get a report once a week or once a month, and that report changes, that's a big deal. So educating 10,000 people on what a new report looks like and why requires some ramp up period and requires some training. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and I think in the message will probably be along the lines of things will likely get worse before they get better. Like GA4 is a very powerful tool, and I think as you said, it's more user experience driven, as in it's not page views anymore, like how many people visited my page or my local page. It's more like, no, how many people as part of their journey visited my page, but then came over to my shop or my business, maybe did something in the mobile app, because again, everything now comes together. So it's more about, okay, how do users, what's the user's journey with our brand, our brand, and how do they act? What events do they do? What events drive conversion? So it's way more about the user experience rather than how many people hit the page and how many seconds did they stay on that page and didn't they bounce, or did they bounce? Now those things are sort of oldish, I would say. I mean, they're still there. You can still bring them up, but they're kind of tucked away now. It's way more about, okay, what events are important to your business, your brand, and are people, are they doing those events? Are they taking action on those events? Are they then converting into becoming a buyer or whatever it is? It's like we've said before, more responsibility, more work, but in the end, it will drive you to better decisions and to understanding your users, your visitors, your clients much better in how they make their online and digital decisions.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, right? I mean, yeah, it's going to take work, and I think there are some very positive messages here, right? For an HQ to tell their everybody within their organization, right? We can now track users across web and app, and that's a big deal to a lot of companies. And we can go deeper and watch the customer journey and watch for engagement and conversion better. So a lot of positives, but definitely get the message out that as an organization, you have to adopt GA4 and overcome that learning curve to bringing it into your organization. So with that, I think that's the I think that's the last slide, Charles, outside
All
of
right.
general
All
information.
right, lot of great content. So I've got just a couple of questions queued up, and just to our audience, if you want to shoot us a quick question, we've got a few minutes for questions, and then we have to wrap up. But let's just get right into it. So you mentioned that Google will be using AI with GA4. Could you just very quickly give a couple examples of how AI is going to be a difference maker for GA4?
Yeah, I mean, so first, I mean, that kind of tracks back to the privacy issues where Google is not going to be able to, Google is tracking first-party cookies, but not third-party cookies. And because of that, it actually has to fill in some gaps of data, right? And it's going to do that with predictive modeling, right? And it's going to rely on its machine learning and AI technology that it already has. Basically fill in those gaps and start to provide, you with some predictive analytics. So that's probably the biggest thing to think about when your GA4 is going to be leveraging AI.
Now, this is a little bit of a out of left field follow-up, if you don't mind. I asked earlier about sort of the difference in the effort required to manage these different platforms. Seems like a pretty significant upgrade in the amount of effort that's required on GA4. Do you anticipate any AI automation aiding companies to use this in the future, near future, distant future, whichever future you want to talk about?
Aiding in setting up or
managing analytics going forward.
So I think there was already sort of a precedent in Universal Analytics. So I don't know exactly what it's called, but they have this sidebar or top bar. It moved a few times, but where they kind of pinpointed, hey, we saw that month over month, this particular metric has changed, like your landing page suddenly the bounce rate of your landing page X suddenly spiked from X% to Y%. So there was already some AI going on right there. I mean, AI, it's obviously a buzzword, and especially in the last couple of months, like everything is AI now. In the end, it's still statistics. So there's already a bit of that in Universal Analytics. I haven't seen much more than that in GA4 probably yet, but I do expect them to add more, like to probably kind of provide already some reports based off of your event. Like if you're a business, an e-commerce, or a gaming company that creates specific events that are important to your business, I might expect that at one point they're gonna understand what they mean and how it's important to you, and probably already help you set up certain reports or highlight certain things that have changed and that have happened. But in the end, like anything in AI, even with ChatGPT now writing tons of text, like it's still up to you to kind of use what they give you, but then make it better and tweak it towards you. So I think it still makes sense to understand GA, even though a robot can help you set it up. I still think it makes sense to open the hood and understand how the engine works, rather than just drive me from A to B.
You're still going to need a team. You're still going to need a team to run it.
But I like Charles. I love where your head's at, though. Let's get AI to get in.
It will eventually. It's not going to replace our dogs either. So, okay, one wrap-up question kind of goes back to the start, or kind of goes back to some things we talked about earlier. For those who've not started using this yet, what's a good first step? And that may be a good place to end.
Yeah, so I think the first step would be, even if you haven't decided on a company level on what the structure will be, just set up a property, like create a new one, install it in your website, so at least you'll get data flowing. So there, like I said, there's some defaults already set up, so you'll get some data in. And especially if you live in both worlds with still Universal Analytics and GA4, you can start using to see, okay, what did we have in Universal Analytics? How does it translate into GA4? Like, can we sort of rebuild reports we were already having? The longer you wait, the less data you'll have in the new world versus the old world, and it's going to be harder. The longer you wait, the harder it's going to get to understand the things you used to have, how are they translated into the new world. So that's the first thing I would do anyway, like today. If you can set up a property, even if it's not properly configured and decided on how the structure will be, at least you'll have some data to work with. And then, yeah, it's the step process I said before. Yeah, think of how the structure, or it needs to be decided at a company level, but what a good structure will be. Then define events, conversions, etc., etc. But the first thing to do today, set up a property. Even if you don't use it yet, at least you have the data flowing in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Well, we've got to wrap up, but just 2 quick points. If you look to the screen, if you do go to WooRank.com, we actually have a whole section on GA4, and in fact, we've got the clock counting down. And when we say GA4 starts on July 1st, it's a little scarier than that. Universal stops tracking on July 1st. So if you're running Universal, like it's literally, you know, Google's going to stop processing hits into Universal.
Yeah, there's not a choice here, right? It's just a matter of when. Yeah.
And then really quickly, the other thing is we do have another webinar in a couple weeks coming up. We're not going to stop talking about GA4. So over on the TruPresence site, we've got another webinar coming up on GA4. So.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we'll end it there. Thank you very much, Jeremy and Nils. It's been a great webinar, lots of great content. I just got a couple wrap-up points to make before we end. This webinar and all previous webinars will be available on our website at locology.com. Just navigate to locology.com, go to the Research and Resources tab and find webinars. And thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Please be sure to visit locology.com and subscribe for updates to be the first to know about future webinars. And I also, personally, as someone involved in planning our next conference, I want to encourage you to check out L23, which is our conference coming up in April in beautiful Coronado Bay, California. And if you go to the events, locology.com, the events tab, and find L23, you can learn more about that conference as well. So I will really want to thank everyone for coming today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.